Hello and welcome to Relatable Code. In this video, we're going to go on a tour in Android Studio. So let's get started. So let's begin by creating a new Android Studio project. So you're going to have to navigate to New Project here. As I've told you before, this might be different for you. Okay, because I already have some projects loaded into Android Studio. So the position of New Project may be different for your case. But you just have to click on New Project, wherever it may be. You click on Empty Views activity. After that, you click Next, and you give your application a name. Okay, I'm going to call it my YouTube application. Leave that as it is, leave that as it is. I think we're going to go with the default settings. And after that, everything looks good, so we click on Finish. Okay, and this is where our project will start to compile. So I'll see you after it compiles. And now, this is the first thing you're going to see when your project loads. Okay, so we're going to start at the left with this panel. Let's begin with this. At the top left, you're going to see a section called Android. Okay, you have several sections you can choose here. Many times we will choose project in the future, but for now we will work with the Android section. So that's all you need to do with that. And we're going to move on to our manifest. Okay, double click on that file. And that's our manifest file. So what is the manifest? Imagine the manifest as the table of contents of a book. Okay, it lists important meta information about the application, the permission it needs, the activities it contains, and other essential components as well. Just like you'd look at a book's contents to know its chapters, Android uses the manifest to understand the app structure. Okay, so here you have the activity that we were talking about. We will dive deep into this in the future. And we can define some certain permissions that we want our application to have, such as maybe access to the internet connection, access to the user's contacts, and many other permissions as well. Okay? And you're going to see lots of fields here, one of which is, for example, the allow backup that determines whether or not the information inside this application is retained. Okay? Another field that we can look into is the app icon itself. You can change your application's icon from inside the manifest. You have a normal icon and you have a rounded icon. Okay, we will get to those later. This determines whether or not your application supports the right to left language. This determines the theme of your application, where you can define a custom theme that you can use, which includes colors and many other styles as well. Okay. And now we're going to move on to our main activity. The main activity that you can access by double-clicking here. Okay, so what's the main activity? It's the first screen users usually see when they launch the application. Okay, the main activity is responsible for the initial setups, the user interactions, and launching other activities as well. Okay, and by that I mean if you click here on activity underscore main, control left click on it, you can see the design of the first page that the users will see when they launch your application. And this part here is where we will write the Kotlin code for our application. This part will be the XML code of our application, which is responsible for everything that the user sees, basically. Okay? So the main activity, in fact, works with the design that we define here in the XML code. It puts it together and it really makes the app come to life with your Kotlin code. Okay? You will notice that you have two other folders here besides the main folder. You have a folder for Android test and you have another folder for test. We will not dive deep into these yet. I will reserve them for another section. Okay, so we're going to start with the resources folder, which is located right here. Your resources folder is your apps palette. This is where you will find the design elements that you need for your application. Okay, and we're going to start with the drawables folder in your resources section right here. Okay, notice that we have two drawables. One is called IC Launcher Background and one is called IC Launcher Foreground. This folder is the gallery where all your app's artwork is stored. Okay, this includes images, icons, and custom graphics as well. So this background here is a custom graphic, and this foreground is another custom graphic. Okay, they come by default when you first create your Android application. Okay, so this is where in the future we will create some images, whether they are PNGs or SVGs or even other types of images. Okay, so next we have our layout folder right here. Okay, double click on that activity underscore main.xml file. The layout files are the blueprints of each screen or activity in the application. They define how different UI elements are arranged in your screen. Okay. Next, we have the bitmaps of our application, which you can find here. Okay. The bitmaps are your app icons, which are optimized for different device resolutions. Just as a billboard image won't fit in a photo frame, different devices need differently sized icons. Okay, you can check these icons here. If you double click on IC Launcher, you can see that this is the launcher icon of our application. Okay, you can expand it here. As you can see, you have 5 different PNG images here, each one of different size. Okay, so this is the HDPI, this is the MDPI. They look exactly the same, and here you go. This is the XXX HDPI. Okay, they are designed to support different screen sizes, and you have an XML one as well. Okay, the same goes for your rounded icon for your application. As we've discussed, you have a square icon here and a rounded icon, even though they look exactly the same. But the rounded icons, as you can see here, are basically round. Okay, that's the smallest image, that's the biggest one, and you have an XML image as well. Okay, these XML resources are lighter than the PNG images here. So very often we will use these XML resources when we deal with our drawables in our application. Okay, we will rarely use any PNG files because they are pretty large in size. Okay. Now, what about the values section of your resources folder? Your values folder here will have a colors file, a strings file, and a themes file. Okay. With respect to your colors file, this is basically the color palette of your application. So instead of remembering every shade of color in your application, you can give it a name and you can use it wherever you want in your application. So you will access it by its name, and by doing that, you will access the value of that color. Okay, this will eliminate the need of having to basically copy paste this color wherever you need it. So when you want to change your color, you just change it in one place, and that will reflect in every other place in your application. Okay? With respect to the strings of your application, you can access them from this file. The strings file is basically the app script. Okay? Every text element from button labels to dialog messages to basically any label in your application will be defined here. So you will give the string a name and a value, similar to what we did with the colors. You will access this value with this name. Okay, this will also eliminate the need for copying and pasting this value wherever you need it. And in addition, when you want to localize your application to support other languages, maybe French, maybe Italian, maybe Spanish, you will define them all in the strings files. Okay, so this is an English strings file. You will then define a strings file for every other language that you want to support, and you will use basically the same key for your strings, but with different values. Okay, so this will be translated to French or Italian or Spanish or whatever language you will support in this application with the help of your strings file. Okay, and now for the themes. You have a theme for the light mode and a theme for the dark mode. Okay, The theme is basically the app's wardrobe. It defines the consistent style of your application, like the fonts, the colors, and the UI component design throughout the application. Okay, you have a theme here, which is your normal app theme, and you have another theme called Night, which is the theme for the dark mode of the application if you want to support dark mode. Okay, and we will get to styles in detail in a future video, so don't worry about that. Next, we have backup rules and data extraction rules. Okay, consider these as the security guidelines of your application. They will dictate what data can be backed up and how data can be extracted. A bit like safety instructions during a flight, if you want. Okay, so these are your backup rules and these are your data extraction rules. Don't worry about these for now, and let's move on to the next section of Android Studio. And now, let's proceed with Gradle. Let's get a brief understanding of Gradle. You can think of Gradle as the construction manager of your app project. It orchestrates the building process, ensuring that all components are aligned, all resources are available, and that the final product, your application, is constructed as needed. Okay? Let's begin with the project level Gradle, which is the first one here. You can think of this as the blueprint for building a neighborhood. This file, commonly named build.gradle, is where you specify settings and configurations that apply to the entire project, like the class path for different plugins. So this is where you define the plugins which will be available for your whole project, okay, for all the modules of your project. And here you can find the build.gradle for your app module, okay. If the project Gradle is for the neighborhood, the app Gradle is like a blueprint for a specific house in that neighborhood. This is also called the build.gradle file. This is specific to the app module, as we've discussed. Here you can specify dependencies or libraries, the SDK versions that you want to target, the build types, and other information as well. Okay, I'm going to give you some useful info from this file. For example, this is your application's namespace. Okay, com.example.yt application is what you see with your code. Okay, that's the name of the package that you will be working on in your code. Okay, compile SDK 33 means that our application is compiled against this Android version. Okay, so if there is a newer version, for example, 34, which has a certain set of Android tools that we can use for our project, we can't use them unless we increase this version to 34. Okay, so by saying that this is equal to 33, this means that we can use all of the Android tools and APIs that are supported until API level 33. Okay, underneath that you have the minimum SDK, which specifies the minimum Android version that you are willing to support in your application. Okay, as of the time of recording this video, this minimum SDK by default is equal to 24. Okay, underneath that you have Target SDK. What's the difference between Target SDK and Compile SDK? Target SDK is the version that your application is optimized to run on. Okay, or if you want the maximum Android version that your application is optimized for. This doesn't mean that your application won't run on new versions, but certain behaviors may not be available for your application if they are exclusive to that Android version. Okay? These two here, the version code and version name, you don't have to worry about them. You will use them when you want to publish your application. Okay? This is related to testing. We will not tackle this now. Underneath that, we have build types. Typically, you will have a build type for debug so that you can test your application, and another one for release for when you want to release and publish your application. Okay, So this is where you define the settings for that release build. Okay. Underneath that, you have compile options, which includes the Java version that you are trying to compile on. In our case, that's Java version 8. Okay. Underneath that, you have Kotlin options, which contains the JVM target, which is the JVM that Kotlin will run on. In our case, that is also 1.8, which is Java 8 in our case. Okay. And that's it for Kotlin options. Underneath that, you have the dependencies. The dependencies are basically the tools that you will use in your application to make the development process faster and more efficient. Okay. So next we have our ProGuard rules. We will not dive really deep into ProGuard, but I want you to know that ProGuard is like the security system of this house. Okay, it ensures that intruders can't easily figure out the blueprint details of this house. Technically, ProGuard optimizes and obfuscates your code, making it difficult to reverse engineer. In the ProGuard rules.pro file, which is this file, you specify the rules about which parts of your code to keep intact and which parts to obfuscate. Okay, so when you want to release your application, parts of your code will get encrypted so that they can be more difficult to reverse engineer. So in this file, you can control which parts get encrypted and which parts stay the same, basically. Okay. After that, we have the Gradle properties file, this one. You can think of this file as the preferences or settings of your construction tools. Technically, in this file, you can define configurations that will influence Gradle's build behavior. Okay, this could be memory settings or, for example, enabling or disabling specific features. The most prominent one in my example is how much RAM you are willing to allocate for Gradle to run your project. Okay. If you have a high-performing setup, I would recommend increasing this number a little so that your project can compile at a faster time. Okay. You can find different settings here, such as whether or not you want to use Android X, the type of style that we want to use for our Kotlin code, whether it's the official guidelines for Kotlin code styling or any other style that you want. Okay. And that's our Gradle.properties file. Now, our Gradle wrapper properties file ensures that everyone working on constructing our house uses the same set of tools. Okay. Technically, this file specifies which version of the Gradle build tool that the project uses, ensuring consistency across all environments. Okay. So this line of code here in particular specifies the version of Gradle that will be used in this project, which is in our case version 8.0. Okay, so when we want to work with other developers on this project, we will share the same Gradle wrapper properties file, which will ensure that we will work with the same version of Gradle to ensure that we don't have any conflicts between our projects. Okay. Now, the local properties file of our Gradle scripts is like the personal notebook of the construction manager. It contains specifics about the local work environment. Okay. Technically, this file is unique to a developer's machine and usually contains the path to the SDK on that developer's machine. Okay, it's not shared with other developers because every developer will have this SDK location unique to his or her device. Okay. And finally, our settings.gradle file. You can think of it as the checklist of all the houses that need to be constructed in our neighborhood. Okay. It technically keeps track of all the modules in our project, so when you add a new module, it gets registered in this file. And in addition, as you can see, you have some certain repositories blocks of code here. These basically represent the stores where you will get the tools that you need for this application. Okay, remember the tools that we were talking about here basically. This is where you get those tools. Okay, basically where you define your repositories, blocks of code. You have three main stores if you want. They are Google, Maven Central, and the Gradle plugin portal, as you can see here. Underneath those, you have your project's name and the modules that you are using in your application. Currently, we are only using the app module, okay? And that was a complete tour of Android Studio. I want you to get familiar with your project structure so that you can get more comfortable with coding using this IDE. If you find this type of content to be relatable, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for future content, and I'll see you in the next video.